Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokemon card collecting podcast, featuring David Person, owner of the world's most complete English Pokemon card collection, and Dan Norton, a longtime collector with all the knowledge behind the cards.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Koffee Talks. I'm back here once again with David. First of all, we just have to say a huge thank you to the amazing response to last week's episode. I guess when we put it out, we weren't 100% sure how the comments and how the feedback was going to go, but really things have been overwhelmingly positive. You know, probably over 90% of the feedback we've had has been super positive, so I just want to thank you guys all for that. We've got some follow-ups and stuff today. I know David has said he has a little bit more to say. So David, why don't you take us into it? Why don't you jump right in? Tell us what you have to say today.
Dan, I've always got more to say. That's just not a good thing at all. I don't know. It could be a good thing, maybe not a good thing. I do follow what Dan said. I want to say thanks so much to everybody. My positive percentage was 95%. So obviously what's happened is I'm getting 100. I think Dan's getting like 85. And then when you average it out, that's why Dan said maybe around 90. That's not even an average, Dan. It's like 180. You got to then average that, assuming we each got 50% of this stuff. Mathematicians step in. Okay, there's a couple of aerospace engineers out there. So, but I will say just by numbers, it's pretty astounding. For this little tiny Dan's, I call it his little old Koffee Talks podcast, over 1,500 views. So that's pretty cool. And I know a lot of you guys actually took some advice. That don't ever do that often with me. And you watched the whole thing, which is pretty amazing. I actually could not take my advice because it's I can't. I'm so old. I've got to watch it in 6 to 8 segments myself. Dan, I want to tell you, can we just tell everybody what time we're filming right now? Because here it's like 6:30. Dinner's cold. Dan says to me, David, I got to take another nap. He's always napping. And some people think that's healthy. Some don't think it's healthy. But the thing is that I should be at a senior citizen dinner place right now where you get the early special, like between 4 to 6. I can't eat because I can't eat before we do these. You know, you get so nervous and stuff. So Dan, thanks for postponing my dinner and not letting me get the good senior citizen rate and stuff. And I'm just going to roll right in. Does that sound okay?
That sounds fine to me.
Because I should have rolled in 5 minutes ago. Guys, sorry about not having the pink hair today. I thought for one more podcast, I'd take it real seriously. And then after that, we're going back to the old stuff that we do. Just get used to it. We can't be bothered with this nonsense anymore. So 95% positive feedback on the comments. I'm going to say right off time, if I had time, we'd read them all. Dan would read them all. We don't. So I'm just going to point out a few people that said something or whatever that kind of, you know, oh, by the way, you should read the public comments. They're kind of interesting. There's about 68 or 80 of them out there if you count Steven. We love Steven. He's always got something to say. So I think he threw in a few at the end. So I just want to personally thank everyone who took the time to post. I'm going to particularly shout out Hulking Mass. Hulking Mass, that guy was weaving in and out of all of the negative comments that were out there like he was a pit bull determined not to let any of the naysayers get ahead of anything here, okay? So even to the extent that he actually responded to somebody who was out there as Barney's Buys and called him out as possibly being, we thought it might have been someone through Rattle, but he thought the language might have sounded a lot like Pratt. And he called him out and said a lot of things about that. And then finally that person actually retracted the comments entirely, I think pulled them away. I will tell you, when I read the comments, they went so far as to actually, if you didn't read them, talk about my comment in the last podcast about me taking care of my clients, over $300 million worth of clients' money under management, and criticizing me for charging them transactional fees. How could I do that? But I'm going to tell you something. I don't charge them transactional fees, so that was a nice jump and guess. And the other thing is that I'm pretty proud of the fact that we charge them basically less than 1% a year to manage their lives, financial planning and investment management, such that they don't have to worry about money for the rest of their life. They don't have to worry about outliving their money. They don't care about being rich. They don't ever again want to be poor. And that's exactly what we do. And I'm really proud of it. So Hulking Mass, loved him jumping in there. And one more comment or one more shout out to Dan Zone 4. Dan Zone 4. He did the same thing as well in a lot of those comments, some extended discussions with a lot of wonderful logic and support that I thought was really, really amazing. And just to take the time to support what Dan and I are doing in some of the positions that we have. So finally, on the support side, I want to say thank you so much for all of you that share your stories. You share our stories with your stories. You make up stories with our stories. You've got stories to tell others about our stories. And one of those, for example, was, let's see who did that. Somebody did it with about 13,000 followers. Shining Pokelector was fantastic to doing that. And I know several other of you did that as well. It's not just the numbers. It's just that you would do it for any of your followers. It's pretty remarkable. Some of you just supporting us that way. Let me say, so I'm going to just jump into something because I have this sort of compartmentalized, and then Dan and I will do more back and forth. But I wanted to talk real quick about one of the comment chains that went on for about 12 replies. And so it was to do with whether or not EGC grades well, or does PSA grade well, or should one be over the other? And I actually threw a response in there when it was down to like the 11th or 12th reply. And here's what I wrote. I said, seems like at the summary level, all you are saying is grading card companies suck. And that may be completely true. In my opinion, most important is improvement in the processes over the course of time. Just today, I posted a 4th print Charizard, which I bought graded as a PSA 9. Not only did the label not indicate 4th print because it was graded so long ago, but it also would have no chance of getting a 9 grade today. I just looked at it. There's no chance it's a 9. It'd be maybe a 7.5 or 8 at the top. But I bought it as a set of the 4th prints that I needed, not looking at it or anything. So that's how it was graded. So ultimately, the choice becomes to use the best resources at the company's disposal at any point in time, or choose not to grade certain categories of cards at all. The company's choosing not to do that. That's a decision each company has to make on their own based on available tools to do the job right. Weighed against the associated positive publicity or negative backlash, which will come along with how good or bad they actually do. And we're going to talk about this more later in the podcast as well. Dan, anything on your thoughts on that? Does that seem like it makes sense to you as well, or anything come to mind?
I mean, I definitely agree with the comment that you said of basically all grading companies suck. Like, I think that there is no perfect grading company. I think we've talked about it before. It is just everyone is willing to ignore what their chosen grading company does. I mean, I got into it with someone recently just about this Raichu article where they were saying, oh, CGC have done these things. And it's like, yeah, I'm not saying they haven't, but I will tell you that PSA have done the same thing. And they're like, oh, well, whatever, this is about TGC. It's like, okay, yeah, this is about TGC, but you like PSA, so you don't bring those up when it comes to PSA. One of the big things they talked about was recently some YouTuber or some Instagrammer hand cut some cards, sent them into CGC. CGC, whoever graded them, mistook them for being real miscuts. When obviously they found out, CGC tried to get them back. They cancelled the guy's subscriptions. They basically banned him from the company, whatever, and obviously put the person who did it back into retraining. And people are bringing this up like this is the death knell for CGC. And I point out, hey, this is exactly the same as what PSA did a few years back when someone sent in a 4-position only Charizard when they weren't grading those. They sent it in just listed as a regular Expedition Charizard, and it got graded. And then as soon as the person showed it off on social media saying, hey, I got this graded, PSA did literally exactly the same thing. They tried to get it back. They cancelled all of the guy's subscriptions, banned him from the company. It's exactly the same situation. Someone went out of their way to try and fool the company, succeeded, and the company responded in a certain way. But the people who like PSA, they're not going to talk about when PSA did it. They're going to talk about when CGC did it. People who like CGC, they're going to try and sweep it under the rug that's happened with CGC lately. They're going to talk about when PSA did it. It's the same thing. Every grading company has these mistakes. Every grading company has rough things happen in their company sometimes. Every grading company is the same. They all do it. There is no grading company out there that hasn't done this. So just want to throw that in and get that out there again. You know, you're right when you say basically all grading companies suck. They're all the same. There is no grading company that doesn't have these. There's just personal biases that people have.
And that's really the last thing you said is really important. It is the most important thing is we don't try when we, give information here, we're trying to put aside personal biases. That's really the whole thing. You're trying to present something factual and not one-sided for one's interests. And that's really what last podcast and this one's going to kind of be about. Can you be objective in your analysis and not subjective or actually do something specifically for your own interests? And that's really what it does keep coming back to, is there are personal biases. Somebody might have their whole collection graded with PSA, and they're not going to ever say that CGC is any good because they want PSA to maintain a better reputation, whatever. So kind of makes sense, kind of common sense, but people really do forget about it. I think it's interesting when you see folks that have a lot of different card grades and card grading companies involved in their card grading, because it really says that they don't necessarily worry so much about it. They're just hoping that authenticity wise mainly, and then plus whatever the number is, that it's at least going to be reasonable and something in line with their expectations. So I'm going to move on to just some of the things that people said to me in private Instagrams, okay? And so when I talk about the private Instagrams, you guys can read all the public comments. I'm going to allude to a few later, not too many, but the private ones you can't see, and I thought some of them are interesting, so I'm going to kind of jump through them very quickly, and hopefully they'll lead to some other discussion points as well. So Hulking Mass, who I referred to as somebody who was out there kind of firing bullets back, said, fun fact, SM Pratt, PK, another user, I guess, and a few other PokeTubers turned me on to CGC as someone new to grading. I thought the new holders and labels looked great and went well with any card as opposed to the red frosted PSA holder. But then all I heard from these PokeTubers was how evil CGC is and how the company is dying. So I, of course, spent a long time seeing if there was any reason I shouldn't use their services for my personal collection. I found that the things they are accused of are some combination of not that bad, not unique to them, and not applicable to my use case. These guys make a living dealing in PSA products and hated the recent CGC changes so much. They wouldn't stop making content about it, never disclosed their conflict of interest. At one point in the video, PK literally said, I hope people don't like these new labels. If any, this content from PSA salesmen made me more confident in going with CGC. And I'm happy I went with him. Fair graders and the holders look really nice, cheaper to grade, and faster turnaround times. I honestly feel sorry for people who are always talking their book online, but pretend they are providing a commentary service to their audience. I can't imagine what state of mind brings that out, but it doesn't sound good. Edit, to be clear, I have absolutely nothing against PSA, but PokeTubers who have cash flow and investment dependencies on PSA turned me off to them with duplicitous content like this. So this is what we just said. You need to understand from my perspective, and I'm the best one to put it out there. I've really never graded any of my cards. I mean, it's really recently done these high-end stuff that they've either come or graded or needed to be authenticated. So I'm not one here to say PSA, CGC, I don't care. I'm just trying to point out the inconsistencies when people have a one-sided vested interest in giving you information versus in actually being unbiased in that. Can I go on, Dan?
You can go on.
Okay, so Steve Jackson, another private comment. Hope you can keep being a positive force in the hobby. All right, so this is important, and I just had a little pause in here so I could recognize that there is a dual debate that goes on at this point when Dan and I decided to do last week's podcast. And the debate has to do with whether or not you deal with trolls and you deal with them. Some people say the only way to survive when you deal with trolls is not to address them at all, not to address any of their content and just act like it doesn't exist. And some feel you need to address it. And of course, I have a legal degree. I have a law background. And so for my law school days, one of the first things you learn is that silence can be used as an admission of guilt. So when Steve Jackson said, hope you can keep being a force in the hobby, a positive force, I decided that we would address it. And Dan's going to talk more about E4 later, but I really had to push Dan a little bit because he is such a good guy, sensitive guy, and didn't want to really get into all this stuff. But I thought it was important since there are so many people that at least watch me and listen to me, and they are still impressionable. A lot of you guys are young or impressionable, and I want you to have the right attitude and right, priorities to maybe be successful in life, that this kind of comment really makes it worthwhile that we actually did this. Because my involvement and my choice to do it was to try to be a positive force against all this other negative stuff that's out there. So let me talk about some of this negative stuff. So I happened to look at, once somebody told me that I was in Rattle's video alongside of clips from our podcast, alongside of sports card sheets being cut, I happened to look at the comments in the video. And the only one that referred to me said this. It was from Smack Daddy Australia. The name is Luke McNeely. Used to follow me years ago, and nice guy, I thought. He responds to Rattle's thing by saying the following. Now I know why Dave hasn't been posting these past few years. That was it. So in other words, well, I'm not posting, obviously, guys, because I'm too involved in altering and miscutting and doing cards and ripping off the public. That's why I disappeared for all the years. So Luke's comments, just empty-headed nonsense. But at least by responding in the videos this way, I'm able to call out the brown noses, like Luke, who enjoy having the doo-doo applied to their faces. All right, that's what's happening. When Rattle posts and he follows him and that's all he follows, doesn't formulate his own opinion, that's all I see. I see somebody that just decided, hey, I like what he said. That's good. That's fine. Uncle Dave's nobody anymore. He's now affiliated with the bad guys. Then you had Sievert Smedsrud, who called me a badass for standing behind my morals. Sievert said, I'm only 19 years old. I work for Chloe and was appreciative of whatever I could do to make my small difference out there alongside of him in standing up for what's morally right in the hobby. And I really love that as well. What a great comment to say, hey, there's actually somebody listening, and maybe it makes him think more about doing the right thing when the times come to those difficult choices. Pokey Starter just wanted to reach out and say the last podcast was great, informative, transparent, entertaining, and a very, very needed dose of reality for the hobby. Danimal, I really appreciated your take on Rattle and really the others as well. I think in the beginning, Rattle was a force for good. He has done a few good things, but over time, I have stopped watching because it just felt toxic and like he was making negative content just because it was good for him and the reputation he built for himself. And his comment about you guys always begging for views is hilarious. Everyone that watches your videos knows that's just you being sarcastic and bringing a little humor into the video. So again, and then congratulated for the Raichus as well. Andrew Johnson, someone in one of my groups mentioned the history with E4 and SM Pratt. I'm surprised, but also not surprised. Money and power changes people. I said it, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I was also on the side of why do you have a Patreon? Just posted in the forum, but I'm still there for the collectors. I do like sharing my own journey and collecting goals. So when Andrew wrote that, I did make sure to clarify, Dan and I are not against Patreons at all. What we're against is folks that use the Patreons as a way to sort of grab you behind the wall and then tell you stuff that they have to tell you for you to keep coming there. We think that 98% of the information that's out there doesn't need to be behind a Patreon wall. It's just general information that could be called by anybody who's taking the time and effort. And so just to do it, and so somebody's going to do it evilly, or someone's going to do it because they want to sell certain cards, or they don't want you to buy certain cards, etc. It's, again, the one-sided agendas that these folks have that are, to us ridiculous. I also will say that I joke a lot about.
If I can just jump in there for a moment, since we're talking about Patreon, I want to address the elephant in the room that we mentioned Patreons a few times, and I do have a Patreon. The difference is my Patreon, I've always said I am never going to put exclusive content on there. The only time I could ever see me making a video or anything that only appears on Patreon is if I do some dead CCG that is, more of an, I want to say, adult themed sounds weird, but for example, I have boxes of the Austin Powers CCG sitting up there on my shelf. That CCG is not family friendly. I couldn't open that on my main channel. In the future, that is the only kind of video, if I ever did it, I'd put on a Patreon paywall because it's not family friendly. I like to try and keep this channel as family friendly as I can. Any sort of my information videos about Pokemon, anything like that, I'm never going to hide that behind a paywall. Currently, my Patreon only exists as a way for people who enjoy my content to throw a couple of dollars at me if they want to. There's never any obligation. I post on there, I do a little bit of a write-up whenever I post my videos, but it's mainly talking about what I've been doing, what I'm working on behind the scenes. If that, it's a very short thing. The main thing that I'm still making is the content, which is still public. So I just wanted to address that in case people had questions about that, about why we have been talking like this about Patreons when I have a Patreon. And of course, I'm never going to try and charge for information. I'm never going to try and charge for my help that I've been giving to anyone. People can always message me on Instagram or anything. Maybe I'm not replying immediately if I'm a bit busy or whatever, but I'll always try and answer a question the best I can. I will obviously say, no, I don't know what you should be investing in, because that's a question I get a lot. I don't know about investments. I don't care about whether I think something should be worth more than it is or whatever. But I'm always happy to talk about prices and price history and stuff. So, all right, back to you, Dave. I just wanted to get that in there.
I think it's really important. I think what people don't realize, and I wanted to say it, so you kind of, we definitely tag team pretty well. I don't believe in a Patreon for myself because I don't believe that it would provide sufficient value for you than any more than you would get off of these. And that's really what it comes down to. When I produce stuff, it's really, am I producing value for my clients? Am I producing value for the audience? Whatever. So I'm going to clarify specifically on me because somebody's going to want to know or ask. I have never made a single penny off of anything I've done social media wise in my limited time of being on social media, a few years with a big break over the last couple. So, and I, frankly, as much as I'd love to have the money, I wouldn't do it for the money because I really don't need the money in the sense I wouldn't make you guys pay for anything. Now, Dan, a little different situation. I'm doing this seriously. Dan puts a lot of time and effort in this stuff he puts on his channel. And so it does help. If there's out there people that say, God, I really respect this guy and what he's doing, and I'd like to give $5, $10 a month to his Patreon to help support his channel, that's what he's talking about. And I think, again, that's fantastic. And I think if you love listening to Rattle or you love listening to SM Pratt on theirs, you pay for what you get. It's your choice, right? Some of us like the gossip stuff. Some of us like the actual real hard news. Some of us like Hollywood. I mean, it's just a matter of whatever each of you like, and I'm not one to judge it. Okay, but I'm not making any money on it, so I'm hoping to push it towards Dan a little bit because at some point he's going to have to pay to get the hair dyed a different color. I don't think it just like washes out after 1 or 2 months. Another comment, Pack in Action, incredible podcast. This is the first I've listened to, but you and Dan are a wealth of knowledge and a joy to listen to. So I'm going to say this now. I encourage each of you, maybe you don't realize, Dan and I have been doing these podcasts for about 7 months now. I don't know what this is, 26, 27, 28. I can't count out much higher than that. So hopefully we maybe just start around with like 28 AB or 5, something like that. So we try to entertain and inform in all of these. And these last ones have been very serious. But before that, not even close to serious. I mean, if I'm on a podcast, I'm as goofy as anybody. All right. So go watch some. You might find something interesting out there. I'm going to throw out one that's one of my favorites in a little bit. Okay. So let's see. I love what you said. He continues about Rattle and throwing around baseless information for view. Him and other people like him really just bring a lot of negativity, and it's incredibly frustrating. All right, now here's an interesting one. And this one points to what I said as well. I got a comment from someone named Will, and he and I have gone back and forth for a few years, always very kind and stuff. And he said, Dave, I respect your collection, the positivity and enthusiasm you had on your first videos. Now, when he's talking about my first videos, I actually have videos on my channel. I don't know how you find it. It's like you go and you type in David Person Pokemon on YouTube, and something comes up from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. He said, I loved watching those videos and learning about the different releases. I've taken a break from watching much content, but watched a little bit of this and hate to say I'm disappointed. I understand wanting to feel heard and having a very cursory understanding of some of the bad blood out there, but I am sad that this has such a negative feel to it. It doesn't pull me into the hobby like your old videos. It almost pushes me away. Anyways, hope you and your family are doing well. Just want to send along an unsolicited and probably unwanted opinion. No, Will's opinion is not unwanted. It's respected. And so all I said to Will was, gosh, buddy, that's a great opinion. I have nothing against it. That's your opinion. It is negative to a certain degree. But I said, we couldn't sit around anymore and just let haters hate. We are too much of respected people in the hobby to do that. And I said, Will, you think all we're doing is hating. Have you seen the last 26 podcasts? When we didn't hate on anybody, we had fun and entertained and informed. And he goes, no, I really haven't. Maybe I should go watch those. So we are not going to change the tone or tenor of this channel. This is going to be the last video that's going to deal with almost all of this stuff, maybe a few lingering comments. We're going back to what we do, but we're glad to be able to put some stuff out there that's important, even if it's for nothing more than historical perspective purposes, and let people formulate their own opinions on it. Dan, you want to cut in, or I got just a couple more?
I think that's fine. Just keep going with yours.
Okay. Lonic Collects, Lonic from the UK, said, greetings from the UK, Uncle Dave. Been a long time watcher of the podcast, but just wanted to show my support for the most recent one. I hope and imagine most of the messages you've received since the episode came out are positive, but here's another one just in case. The know-it-all toxic personalities like Scott and Rattle thankfully make up the minority of what is overall an amazing community. Dan and I couldn't agree more. Most people hating on the pre-release Raichu are doing it for their own gain in some way, whether that be financial or just because they want attention. Kudos for calling them out and keep doing what you're doing. P.S. In terms of Scott, if you don't know what a prat means in the UK, I'd recommend Googling it or asking Dan. Cheers, Uncle Dave, and also a big shout out to Dan, another legend in the community. Dan's way more of a legend than I am, and if he's not, you guys got it all wrong. Dan, do you want to tell people what a prat is, or is this PG-13 and you can't really do that?
No, in the UK, a prat is just a moron, a fool.
Okay. Well, it makes sense then. Okay. So probably there's karma involved in the naming piece. All right. Now, Kid Collectibles said, Scott, SM Pratt actually blocked me 5 to 6 years ago just because I was asking if he was interested in purchasing any cards. All I did was send over a few photos and I got the block. And FYI, I also sold cards and collectibles to TCA Gaming, Rusty, and Jarvis Johnson a good number of times, who were some of the people mentioned in your podcast with Dan. So I never had any issues with any deals through any of those people. When I realized Scott blocked me, I was shocked that I would get blocked for a simple, friendly reach out and sale inquiry. I'm 100% positive I didn't say anything offensive or disrespectful. I just sent a couple photos of the item I was selling in a message, pretty much how I reached out to you, David, and asked you in the same way if you were interested in purchasing some stuff from me. Yeah, so that's really not nice. Your podcast just shows me more of what kind of person he actually is. Thanks for that. And he went on to say he was glad, actually, at this point that he was blocked now that he knows kind of more of the truth. So Legendary Mewtwo, Chad from the UK, said, mega impressed by your attitude, not grading just to make a buck, clear passion for the cards and hobby. I do grade myself as it clearly fits my style, especially for mid-era cards, but I've always hated how much the big names only promote PSA, as it's clearly what their whole net worth is in. As soon as another company does one bad thing, they're all over it, yet I have so many PSA 10s that are not clean, they'll overlook that as they can sell the label, and we talk about that as well. CBD 1235 collection. Hey, Dave, longtime admirer of your collection and your perspective. Just watch yours and Dan's recent video, having been a moderator on E4 for many years back in the day, and knowing most of the players you mentioned, I just have to say thank you for saying what needed to be said. I find myself yearning for more to be said, and a smiley face. There is so much. Anyway, just quick message to say props to you and Dan and a thank you. Z&G Emporium, a whole different comment.
I have to jump in and follow up that because I got a message.
Okay. Good.
I'm not going to say his real name. I don't know how public he is with his name and stuff at the moment. CBD jumped out at me personally on my Facebook as well. We've been friends for a long time. I'm very glad to hear from him. Glad to hear from a lot of those people who were back in the day users of the forum and stuff. It's been really nice to kind of have my feelings validated somewhat. I mean, I always knew I was in the right, but hearing from these people and that they share some of those opinions and stuff that I've had over the time has always been obviously great. We ended up just talking about his current travels. He's actually visiting the UK at the moment. We talked a little bit about that. We got very, very off Pokemon topic very quickly, but just wanted to shout out as well and say, absolute legend, CBD1235. Absolutely incredible person. I think, let me double check. I'm seeing if he still has his collection posted on Insta. Yes, it's a CBD1235 collection. Go and check him out. He has an unbelievable collection. Definitely check him out on Instagram. Yeah. And regardless of how it's graded, just let it go. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm just teasing. Stop. All right. I got a great comment from Z&G Emporium. Has nothing to do with any of this stuff. It's just something about, for me personally. He said, big congrats on the pre-release Raichu. Always had that as #1 card in prestige. Remember as a 12-year-old, always going to the grocery store with my mom and spending the whole time reading Beckett, TCG, or Pojo, or Nintendo Power magazines. And vividly remember in 99-2000, a picture of pre-release Raichu being the #1 top card in those magazines always. Very cool to say they are real after 20 years of wondering. So you have to understand why that comment resonates with me is because I'm 62, like you guys don't know that already. And, if you think about what he's talking about, he's got to be around 35-ish now, give or take. And so many of you are still younger, from 19 to 30 and maybe didn't really know a lot about this card. But even Dan, decades ago, when he was like 4 to 5 years old, I still remember him doing the videos with diapers on, was actually talking about this card and its value and the number of the top 10 valuable cards. And
So it is so incredible to understand that there's such a historical perspective to the pre-release Raichus that is going to get lost on a lot of the newer people. But hopefully some of these podcasts and some of the controversy actually sort of opens their eyes to some of the stuff that was big in those magazines in the old days. Dan, anything about your videos back then? Are they even worth watching, or people should say no, because who wants to watch a guy in diapers act like he's smart?
They're not from that far back. Honestly, I do think some of them are worth watching. Some of the information videos I did back then still hold up. You know, the pre-release Raichu video from back then is still the most watched video on this channel, and it still gets views. Like, every year, it's still in my top 20 most watched videos of the year, even though it's from like 2013. People still go back to it as a reference point. And then I think I mentioned even last week, the video I did on the English Versus series back then, when we talked about, discovering the changed version, the corrected Mantine because of yours. I think that video is still worth a watch. I mean, I definitely think people should give that one a watch if they want to know about the English Versus series. I think it still holds up. The Stadium Challenge Deoxys video I did a few years back, other than we've slightly learned some new information about the number of copies that are out there, still holds up in history of sales and stuff. So if you like my videos, you know what? I don't know why I'm being so modest. Go and watch all of my old videos. Every single one of them. They're all amazing.
And you were very smart as a baby, because I've really never seen anyone. You guys think I'm joking. The guy was in diapers. I'm not sure it was because of his age or maybe a bowel problem, but I think he's rectified at this point. No intention to wreck them at all. There's just, that sounds the same. All right, I'm going to go on now to, we're done with comments, and I'm going to tell you a little story about what happened. And this happened this week. This was a client of mine. I'm going to call him a client, but I kind of thought he was a friend, certainly in my respect. And he wrote this to me after the video of the podcast we did last week came out. Now, you got to remember something. We called out a bunch of people, and one of the people we called out was Rattle. All right. So listen to what this says. Hi, David. I believe Sean Bassick and Evan Mathis were the ones who cut the disco card I purchased. So let me give you a little bit of background. Rattle did a video talking about people cutting sheets and altering sports cards. And he implicated some people in there. And two of the people in there were Sean Bassick and Evan Mathis. Okay. And so he made it, then he puts me in pictures in the video and says I'm involved because I'm a friend of Sean's and all the rest of it, just to, again, push his negative baloney agenda. No facts at all. I'll show you in a minute. So this friend of mine, client, says, I believe those two were the ones who cut the disco card that I purchased. Based on their history, they not only cut sheets, but alter the cards with erasers and such. This is a very shady group, and if possible, I would rather have my money back and return the card to owner. I don't want tampered product in my collection. It doesn't feel right. So I responded and I said, hey, buddy, I expected way more than that from you. You struck me as an independent guy with insight, not a follower of some troll's BS. The only person who cut cards in the past and admitted to doing so was Evan Mathis. Sean was employed by him for a single job, which had absolutely nothing to do with cutting cards. But I guess you watched the Rattle podcast and bought his BS hook, line, and sinker. I know Sean to be 100% above board in all of his endeavors. He's an acquired taste because he's almost too abrupt, both in the way he generally interacts with others, but also in his truthfulness. But that doesn't change the fact his intentions are always top notch. Now, when I comment on someone's personality, that's my opinion, okay? Do you want to hear something? I'm going to digress. You want to know that people, Dan, I'm not talking about you, so keep quiet for 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you that people call me eccentric. Do you know what eccentric means? Am I eccentric? I don't think so. Dan shaking yes. So here's the thing. I may be, and that's okay. People are going to call me what they're going to call me. It's just a term of whatever it is, all right? Now, let me continue what my response said to this guy. I said, there is an entire documentary now in final editing, which addresses the cutting of the disco sheet. Do you really think that film would be distributed if everything in it was not completely above board? Do you think I would have been agreed to be interviewed in that documentary if I had any worries about it impacting my reputation? Look, guys, now I'm going to tell you what I say, okay? This I'm saying to you guys. I cannot control what you think about me and others cutting up an original uncut sheet of Pokemon cards. If you think that it's not right, then that's something different. I understand it completely. You're entitled to your opinion. We've cut into the history of the Pokemon hobby. I get it. That's your opinion. But I've already mentioned, I personally could not store that sheet. I wanted to get cards off that sheet for a collection I could put in binders and enjoy. I wanted others to be able to enjoy other sets from that sheet. And that was what we were able to do by doing this cutting of a disco sheet. And I wanted everything we did to be full information and transparency. Okay. And boy, did I share that full information down to the last dollar I spent on every single piece of the transaction, what was traded for and all the rest of it, which Dan tells me is in our previous KT Coffee Talks podcast number 19. That is my favorite one. Okay. I shared way too much information. Do you understand what I said there? Way too much information. And by the way, and that's one of my favorites on our channel. By the way, I think it says also one of the favorites on Rattle's channel, since that's where he cuts out all the pieces of me talking and puts them next to sheets being cut. Do you know when I was going to have that sheet cut that I said to my friend Sean, so what do? We cut it and then we round the corners, right? Because I don't know anything about cutting sheets or how you do it or anything. And he goes, no, we don't cut no corners, because that's trying to make cards look authentic, different than what they are. This is cut off a sheet. These were not distributed cards. We're going to tell everybody exactly where they came from and how they came and what was done. That's what he said to me. I wasn't trying to do anything underhanded. I just don't know anything about how you cut sheets or how you round corners or anything. So that's the kind of guy I'm dealing with over there. Okay. So I said to the guy that made this comment to me, since I know you watched my most recent podcast on the pre-release Raichus, where I called out Rattle's hate and lies, and you still chose to believe him and them, I think it's best you don't follow me anymore. I'm interested in interacting with independent thinkers, not folks who believe everything they hear just because. Of course, I wish you nothing best but the best going forward. And he said to me, I know what it's like to be hunted with a pitchfork based on rumors and ignorance. I wish you the best. Well, if you know what it's like to be hunted, then why are you hunting other people? Makes no sense at all. Okay. I said, gosh, it seems if you did know those things, you wouldn't do the same to others. That makes zero sense to me. So I'm going to revisit this one more time, since Rattle chose to picture me alongside sports card sheets being cut and just to influence others. And he's not coming after my reputation, guys. Look, at every time I get mad, I get closer and closer to the, I notice myself, I keep creeping. And then in last podcast, I was like up here, nobody's going to do that to Uncle Dave. All right. So just sit back, David, just relax, man. Take a chillax pill. All right. So let's go back and talk about this whole thing with Rattle one more time. I'm going to give you more information. Okay. First, I'm going to be honest. Had a chance to rethink a few things, and in the vein of providing full transparency so Rattle cannot say I didn't, I need to tell you guys I've actually cut sheets before, okay? So when my kids were very young, my wife and I would cut sheets into ghost costumes for them for Halloween. And it's not something we're proud of, but I can't say we look back on it with regrets either. And since we're talking cutting, guys, I think I may as well get it all out there now, all right? Other things I have cut, the cheese, both literally and figuratively. I've cut corners at times in presentation preparations, but not corners of cards at any time. I've cut down some shrubs when my wife makes me. I've cut food with a knife and pizza with a pizza cutter. I've cut the fat off steak, not always. I got an obesity problem. I've cut certain folks out of my life when my gut told me they were draining all the energy from me through their negativity. I've cut my son's hair, although he wishes I would not. You've understood that if you've got kids. And I've cut my wife's lifestyle down, which is not okay, and she is not happy with because of all my Pokemon card spending. But let's go back to the cutting of the sheets and what it may or may not have to do with anything in the alteration of cards, so you guys can have the entire picture laid out in front of you. Here's what Rattle said in his comment to our video last week. Careful, Dave, you almost mentioned your new buddy, Sean Bassick. He's heavily associated with sports card alteration. Yes, this includes Sean's previous business dealings with Evan Mathis, which is why I showed the clip of him cutting up sports and Pokemon sheets. No, dummy, you didn't show anybody cutting any Pokemon card sheets. You're ridiculous. Okay, so I'm going to mention my buddy Sean Bassick now, Rattle Idiot. One of the most intelligent, sincere, moral, and eccentric guys I've ever had the pleasure to deal with. Call me eccentric, Sean. I swear to God, I'll call you right back. Talk about the sheet cutting. Okay, so and me cutting the corners. So here's what it is. So I wrote down some notes for me to say to you guys. I'm going to tell you what they said back in the sports card days, but I'm going to tell you how many people have come to me and said, this guy's the most charitable, kind guy, supports causes, charities, advice and guidance for others that ask at no expense but his own. This is the threads from net54baseball.com back in 2019. This is what Mr. Rattle chose not to tell anybody, because I'll tell you why in a minute, but here's what it says. Somebody mentions Evan Mathis as cutting cards. Evan Mathis was a previous NFL football player. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute when Sean responds. So the first person says, hoping that Sean is just selling bad cards he didn't realize were altered. And then we go on. Another person says, agree on both comments above about Sean. No way he would be involved with this. Stand-up guy who just flips collections. Next guy says, I know Sean pretty well and do not believe he will be found to be engaged in fraud. Any one of us could accidentally sell a bad TPG graded card, which we didn't know was messed up. And this was one of the guys that actually bought a Honus Wagner card from Sean, one of the rarest cards in baseball. Guy has millions and millions of dollars. I've dealt with Sean. I'm not mentioning names. I could give you them later. If you want to know, let me know. I'll send them out to you. I've dealt with Sean, and he was a stand-up guy. I fear he may be guilt by association. And then he talks about regarding Mathis, some things that were not quite as clear with Mathis. He wasn't sure how that turned out. Okay. A couple of other points in this. Nobody's talking about these two really anymore. So I prefer to use the half glass full terminology and say most of graded cards are good. This whole debacle has just made it so much more relevant to not buy the holder and know your cards yourself. Isn't it interesting? These are from 2019 and we're still dealing with the same stuff today. What's in the holder is the companies, are the grading companies responsible for making sure it's authentic or not? We still seem to be struggling with these same issues today all the way around. And I'm going to read one more of this. This was kind of tangential, not the same thread, but not about Sean and Evan and all the rest of it. There should be a grading company that simply assesses authenticity, no grades. Just tell me it's real or not so I can be 100% sure I'm not buying a reprint online or altered online, etc. Beyond that, every buyer can make their own determination on condition. At least then all the fraud would be above board. All right. So again, just liking you guys to have the different opinions. Well, here's what Sean said and his response back then. He doesn't choose to deal with any of this BS anymore because Sean has more important things to worry about than getting sucked in to a negative troll's BS. Sean is 31 years old. He's a pancreatic cancer survivor. He's a wonderful man, but he's not going to let this guy take him down any further difficult paths in his life. So I've chosen to speak up. He doesn't want me to. I don't care because I'm going to stick up for what I know is right, and that's what I do. Here's what he wrote back then. I woke up this morning to a text from a gentleman I've dealt with in the past, bringing this thread to my attention. It is not too pleasant to spend a couple hours in the morning reading false accusations and needing to study hundreds of replies via multiple sites to issue a statement. I'm quite irate because an anonymous individual has made an erroneous assumption that libels my and my company's name, assumes guilt by association, and is counterfactual. Evan Mathis posted on the Reddit thread, there is so much misinformation in that thread that it's entertaining. Sean says I would not call it entertaining. The words that come to mind are bothersome and alarming. The post involves me without facts, making stretch assumptions and objectively false statements. Invest in Baseball, that was his company, was hired by Cardology for the 2018 National Convention to assess collections and market for inventory via our customer base and the Cardology booth to help assess collections, ensure he was making fair deals, bring deals to the table, and help some lesser educated staff because of limited bandwidth that the company had. This buying ad is identical to the buying ads that were placed throughout the industry, sent to our email list, and was not conducted any differently than usual business other than I was hired at the very handsome rate to help Cardology. I was actually extremely excited to be working with an NFL player. Wouldn't you guys be? A Super Bowl champion at that. I'm 100% sure every single person who has a business will be willing to work with someone who offers a huge advancement for your company via name association alone. Evan has always been cordial, stand-up, and follows through with his word. If it weren't for him, I would not have been able to grow my company as quickly as it did, and I'm eternally grateful. I make no comment on any of the accusation or assumptions made about him in the blowout thread and only provide comment on the unfounded accusations relating to myself and IIB. Via the anonymous poster's definition, PWCC, Probstein, and COMC are all associates of Cardology. They sold inventory. It is unwarranted to list my company as an associate because the company was hired to work for Evan and unknowingly sold cards on consignment. I'm sure there are hundreds of other vendors, auctions, and collectors who have unwittingly sold altered cards. By this poster's definition, he needs to research them and list them as associates. Respectfully, I request I be left out of this. I've mostly moved on from this industry for 2 years as a business and buy on the side as a hobby to populate my house and enjoy the past that brought me to where I am today. Kind regards, Sean. So here's the thing. Rattle didn't say any of that. Rattle took Sean as a one person who was hired by another person to do a job and lumped him in and said he was doing this, he was altering cards. So he could then make the transition and saying, so now clearly if Sean went to somewhere and cut a sheet, he has to be altering and misdoing cards. Okay. I'm sorry for my language, rather than any kind of whatever. Rattle's assessments, Rattle's videos are not unbiased. They do not present both sides of the information. They are designed, and you will see they will continue to be designed to hurt and harm others for views and views alone. So I'm going to ask you a question at the end about Rattle. I hope you'll stick around and help me answer it because I need your advice on what to do. But when we talk about guilt by association, okay, with Rattle, with no evidence except dumbass reading forum threads. That's what he does. He just reads forum threads and calls out only the negative information to hurt people. That's not even grade school journalistic work. So let me tell you about my first job that I had in life. It was my worst job that I had in life. My first real job, all right? I worked for a company called EDP Audit Controls in Oakland, California. My boss hired me and never, I should say my boss, the head of the company hired me because he ended up being my boss. And I worked there for a number of years, but for the entirety of the first year, he never said a single word to me. If you go to work and your first job and no one says something to you for a year, that's the head of the company, you don't have no feedback at all, man, that is some scary stuff. Every job since then has been wonderful, all right? I used to go along the country. I used to go across the country. I would do computer auditing and military, stuff, looking at their computer code, War Games 1984 stuff, if you look at the movie. And give reports to military bases and other entities about how their computer security was. I used to prepare proposals and do all the rest of that stuff. Well, come to find out that the boss that never spoke to me for a year, he ended up going to prison because he had done things wrong in the company. So if you listen to Rattle, I'm a bad guy because I worked with that guy, for that guy, guilt by association. I can't believe, guys, I'm not in prison right now, honestly. I really can't. I deserve to be in prison. I don't sleep at night anymore because I might actually check myself in. I'm not sure. So this is why I continue to emphasize the importance of formulating your own opinions and your own ways of evaluating anything in front of you. As a child and young man, I could not make a decision, all right? Because I never thought I had the requisite education and talent to be successful. I had no confidence. So you know who I went to? I went to my dad. Over and over and over again. Dad, what do I do? Dad, what do I do? I could not do anything without my dad. My dad passed away December 4th of last year. I miss him. Wonderful man, kind man, not greatly educated, but had a great deal of common sense. And I came to a point in my life where I realized I love my dad to death. He can't help me with this stuff anymore. I now have developed education, my own opinions, my own reasons. I studied, I listened, I learned. And now I have what people would call wisdom. It's not an arrogant thing. It means you guys want help, call me up, text me up, jump in my DMs, but don't do it too much because I got some issues in there. Just jump in, jump out. And I'm glad to help, okay? And that's what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to help you guys and be a resource, not only in the hobby, but anything else you guys need. I'm going to digress, Dan. I'm still going. I got some stuff in my personal life going on. I got to talk for a minute. Thanks for your patience. I saw that the connection disconnected. It came right back. Means you're still there and still listening. I have some people I really care about. They're youngsters in the same age groups as much and most of you folks watching. Not all of you. If Steve Albie's watching, love the guy. He's like 182. Steve, I'm kidding. Other guys, they're as old as me, even older. Okay. So, but here's the deal. In a world where we live in, where it's all TikTok and social media and quick attention spans, so many people are comparing themselves to other people. And that's where they're deciding if they're doing well or they're not doing well, or they look good or they don't look good. And this is extremely prevalent with youngsters in their 20s. And then when they realize things aren't going the way that they think they should because they have these ridiculous comparisons, they then start to develop some form of mental illness, okay? They develop something that says, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, my life's not good enough, I don't like my job, I don't like my significant other. And they don't know where to turn because they don't want to turn to anybody because they don't want to share their hurting or need support because they're afraid of what it's going to look like to the public, their friends, their families, whatever. If you're not reaching out and getting support, if you guys need help in any way, please reach out to me, okay? I got more wisdom in my little pinky thumb. Stan, how can you have a pinky thumb? I've got 6 fingers, guys. One's my pinky thumb. If I can help you guys, if you don't want to go to family and you don't want to go to your significant other, you don't have a good friend, please just reach out. I'll get you through it. I'll explain some factual things you have to do, but you got to ask for help. You got to go to someone and say, I'm suffering. I know most of you guys aren't suffering because you guys are probably the kind of folks that, like, when things get bad, you can wrap yourself in your Pokemon collection and get a respite from it all. I hope that's how it is. But I really mean it sincerely. There's too many people who suffer alone. There's a suicide epidemic. It's crazy stuff. I don't mean to be negative, but please find resources amongst the negativity and the bad comparisons to help yourself when you can help, okay? When you need help, don't go it alone, okay? So I'm going to finish my piece. I'm going to let Dan take over from there. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to say. How about a couple more comments from one of the best guys in the hobby, Rusty at TCA Gaming. You guys know, you guys love him. You love him, whatever. Dan and I love him. Hey guys, not only did Rusty purchase a Disco Charizard from the sheet we cut, he might have also bought other Disco cards. I have no idea, but I've seen him show that one twice in the last couple of weeks or so. He's also agreed to appear in the documentary. So there you go, Mr. Rattle Dummy. I guess you're smarter and more wired in than more moral than anyone in the whole Pokemon community for sure. And Rusty, regarding the pre-release Raichu cards, sent me a message, which I won't actually get into because that's up for him to disclose. But he actually said, David, listen, thinking about what the Pratt information was and who said what at the factories back then and the production managers. And Pratt said now, some people have already messaged me this week and said, yeah, Pratt goes behind his Patreon wall and says, no chance. That card should never have been graded, whatever. It's not the right story. And Rusty said, David, I had the stories from production managers, like Pratt said. But you know what? I don't believe them verbatim. I take the information and make my own judgments. I know things that were true back then that were said, and I know things that were completely false. But I make my own judgment. And I know he believes in the card. He's done a podcast saying it's real. He has no questions about its authenticity and the grading. He has no questions about who did it and the forensics behind it. He makes his own determinations, okay? I'm going to go off to one last topic, and then it's Dan. So I mentioned in the last podcast about friends and friendship. And I had a great response from Jeffrey Lamar Kaiser, okay? He's been such a strong, wonderful supporter of us for so long. And he wrote something to me in another spot even. I think he might have even commented on the video, but then he wrote this to me privately. David, I'll keep it short and say that real friends question your opinions and give constructive criticism while mentioning the friendship. I can't make this go any higher, so now my eyes are down. Just act like I'm looking at you guys. It feels like I am inside my heart. At the end of the day, both people should be able to shake hands and leave on a good note and have another look inside themselves to learn and grow. Currently, American society seems to have some pretty thin skin, and there's a lot of looking out only for me, me, me. We should have the maturity and patience to interact with those we disagree with and learn from those experiences. And what Lamar had written about or talked to me about before was my comments on my set lady that has been making my sets for all these years. So I didn't really talk about that, but in the past, I didn't talk about all the other things that had gone on. And I'm not going to get into all of it now, but basically tremendous delays with no accountability, no matter how many times I would ask, can you please just tell me a status? Always an excuse, always putting something aside. She had put down Dan many times. I never told Dan this, but it was like, why do you think Dan knows everything? And, and why is it, you think he knows everything, but he doesn't know everything? Just stuff that made no sense. How about the different way to say that? Hey, if there's anything, maybe there's stuff that Dan doesn't really know everything about, feel free to come to me and ask for help or whatever. Nothing was ever like that. Always the negative intonations. And so I said this to Lamar. I said, I agree completely and do this daily, the positive and agree to disagree stuff with my work teammates, my family, my business partners, Dan, etc. But you've not addressed what I referred to in the podcast, which is my opinion, the foundational element of friendship, wanting someone to be successful. Rooting for them, celebrating their wins alongside them should be tantamount, paramount to anything else. I don't care whether or not I like what my friends are doing. If it's legal and they feel good about it, I just want to do whatever I can to help them maintain that feeling of goodness. I do not get jealous of my friends' accomplishments specifically because they are my friends. But as I said, of course, just my opinion. There's sometimes people will send me something and say, I got this or whatever. And they don't expect Uncle Dave to say, like, okay, they got this best card they want that's 5, 10, 15, 20. Who cares? I care. So I say, congratulations. I'm so happy for you because I am, because they're happy. And that to me is friendship. Friendship doesn't have to be in something in depth. It can be something you feel even from afar. You guys a lot of you are the best friends I have because we don't make many friends in life, real deep friends. And the fact that you send me messages and say, this is incredible. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. It's an accomplishment for the hobby means everything to me. And I don't care for those of you who think I'm lying through my teeth, think whatever you want. I don't lie through my teeth because I don't need to. So I'm blessed. I'm blessed since that pre-release Raichu got graded. I've picked up 500 new followers, my little dumb little channel, Instagram. 500 new people, many of which are interacting with me daily, sending me messages, whatever. I love it to death. All right. At the end of this thing, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, but right now we're going to move over. Dan is so kind to let me just spew on. The guy's an unbelievable partner. Please support him. But Dan, can we talk about, what would you like? Dan, I know what I'd like you to talk about. What would you like to talk about right now?
Well, I'm assuming you want me to talk about E4 right now, because I didn't know how much what we were going to say on this. And then this week we are officially a banned topic. You cannot mention either of our names on the forum. You will be banned if you mention my name or David's name on that forum. So
that's one of my questions at the end, Dan. But talk to us a little bit. I would love to hear again. My little intro is that for many, many years now, Dan has made me aware of a situation, a problem that happened with E4 years and years ago. And I've just shut up about it. I offered to help in the beginning, and Dan said, David, I just don't want to get into it. It's just too much. It's too much for me to deal with. There's been threats. There's been all this other stuff. And so I just let it lie. But I think it's a great time. You guys have been supportive in this whole endeavor. And I think it's important. Dan can tell you a little bit about what's gone on behind the scenes back when this happened. And that way you can kind of have a more understanding of the situation.
All right, so we'll get into a bit of a history of what happened with E4. It's time now. So people who don't know, E4 was a forum. Well, it is a forum. It was on Pro Boards for a long time. It started off as a UPCCC, which was a silly name that was, I think it was Ultimate Pokemon Card Collectors Club. It was a few of us. When we were collecting, it was people who started on PokeGym. There wasn't much content for collecting on PokeGym. People mentioned we should start our own forum. I set one up. There was a few of us started there. I think at the start we only had about 10 members, just a few of us. And yes, it included SM Pratt, who was someone at the time, like David, I would have considered a good friend. So over the years, it grew. I mean, back then it was a private forum. You had to be invited to join. It grew over the years, and obviously my interest in Pokemon was up and down a little bit due to me playing Magic quite a lot. And I was always an administrator and a moderator on the forum. So was Scott Pratt. So were a few others. Obviously, Scott wanted to make a lot of changes. He kept talking about how he wanted it to grow. He suggested the new name E4. We all got on board with that. Scott somehow took this change over the years to mean that he owned the forum. Because was his name. So weird. Not how it works at all. Anyway, through the years, he was making lots of changes, a lot of changes that a lot of the other moderators weren't on board with, but he basically ruled it as a dictatorship. It was his... He did what he wanted. You know that little founder button, or that founder thing that was under his name? If you're ever on there, you can make that say anything. He wasn't actually the founder. I was, and to the day that forum closed, in fact, it's still open, I'm still on there, I am the admin account. My login username was admin. Always is, always was. I'm clarifying that because I've heard lately that apparently at some point I did a hostile takeover and stole the admin position. Not true. You can't do that. That's not a thing you can do on Pro Boards. So obviously over the years we had a lot of disagreements. One of the biggest ones came to a head when the rest of the admin and moderation team, we found out that Scott was secretly charging some people to use the forum. As in, he was literally saying to some people, and these were people who, you know, they would have a business related around Pokemon or whatever, which they could talk about a bit on the forum. He was saying, oh, because you're a business, you have to pay me if you want to be able to post on the forum. And for some of these people, we're talking thousands of dollars a year that Scott Pratt was charging these people. And this isn't the only way he monetized the forum. You know, he set it up so that anytime you post an eBay link, it converted to an affiliate link of his. He was making money in other ways. Obviously, we had a big discussion with him because we felt this was unfair. It was never supposed to be like that. You know, this was always supposed to be a fan-run thing. It was like, we're all giving our time here. And Scott Pratt's response was that he deserved that money because his time was worth that money, and we did not deserve that money because our time was worthless. Literally said that. He said that we did not deserve to be paid for our time because our time was not worth the money that his time was. Now, if he felt that the forum was not worth his time, he could have left. He could have left in any day, but he wouldn't, because it was a cash cow for him. Because he was advertising his own stuff. There was like a YouTube button that appeared on the top of the forum one day that he had someone set up that just linked to his YouTube account. Obviously, at this time, I tried not to rock the boat too much because, I mean, I was under the, I guess, false impression that Scott had a much bigger hold over a lot of these people than he actually does. When we've seen from the response to the last podcast how little of a hold he does actually have over the community. Next big thing is one day I wake up and he's like, hey Dan, you're not a modder anymore. I'm changing you to an Emeritus status. Now, because I was an admin, it didn't actually do anything. I could still do literally everything on the forum because I was the admin account. He also removed some other moderators who, you know, were not happy with it. They just woke up one day and were told, hey, you're not a mod anymore.
Let me just mention, because the way you pronounce that, it doesn't even exist in the USA language, in the English language. So emeritus, so he's emeritus. He moved down to an emeritus status, which essentially means you used to do the job in the past, but you're not doing it anymore. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. I guess I was pronouncing that wrong. And then, you know, a little while later, I stopped really using the forum at all, just because I didn't want to deal with Pratt and his outbursts. I will say that when he told us that stuff about our time being worthless, this wasn't a reasonable conversation. He was screaming and shouting like a child. Obviously, I don't have the recording of that. Sadly, the person who made the recording of that discussion was 4th Star TCG, who is now one of Pratt's henchmen, along with BFM. So you'll just have to believe me that that's what happened.
No, you're not believable. You have so much reason to lie here because you have litigation going against him and the whole thing. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. So
must be liable, right?
You question Dan. Hang up the phone right now. Wait a minute. Dave, we're not watching on the phone. Oh, no, they are watching on phones. Yeah. You could hang up the phone, I guess. Yeah, don't hang up. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
So I stopped using the forum a lot, and then eventually someone who was in a moderator position came to me and says, hey, just so you know, they're planning on moving the forum to their own website. Well, how? Like, one, there is a way in which on Pro Boards you can, if you have your own URL, you could pay Pro Boards to make it do a redirect, so you just type in the website name and it redirects to the forum, but I was the only one who could do that. I was the admin account. You would need to go through me for that. And I get told, no, What they have done is they have web scraped the forum, taken all the data, and they have rebuilt a clone of the forum on their own server. And as I said last week, when I said Scott Pratt, SM Pratt, PFM, and 4th Star TCG broke the law, this is where they broke the law. Because that is data theft. I confirmed this behind the scenes. So this was before they launched the website. So, I mean, what was the latest lie that Matty got? Was that Scott had to go and make his own forum on his own website because Evil Dan forced him off and deleted his account. No, not true. Anyone with a brain can check that. They can check the dates on that, you know? I think at this point, Scott is just so used to lying and just being able to say anything that maybe he doesn't even know what the truth is anymore. Maybe he just lies about literally everything to the point where he can't even track what's real anymore. But yeah, that is where they broke the law. I confirmed with ProBoards, I confirmed with all the ProBoards admin, when you make a post on ProBoards, you personally own all of your data. So even as the admin, I did not own the data on that website. I owned my posts. You know, Pratt owned his posts. Every single individual user, there's 10,000 users, maybe half of them had ever actually made a post. So say 5,000 people owned their own data on that website. So that's 5,000 people they've stolen data from. And even those other 5,000 who didn't make a post, their email addresses were all scraped from the forum as well. I know this because Laura had an account a long time ago, and which we'll jump to this in a minute, but after some other stuff happened, Laura started getting loads of emails telling her that the forum had moved and all her posts were waiting for her on the new forum. Anyway, that is what happened. Obviously, again, completely illegal. You cannot just steal data from people like that. But they did. I was contacting the server hosts before they did their public launch. This was a few months before. I was trying to get their website taken down. Sadly, the same thing that made it illegal, that, you know, we all own our own data, kind of hindered me because it meant that I could only claim copyright on my posts that were on their new website. Each individual person would have to then file another DMCA report. And I can confirm I filed a successful DMCA report on my posts. They legally had to remove my posts from their website because they were breaking the law by having them there because it was my data and it was data theft. So a successful DMCA claim went through from me for my posts. Anyway, day comes that they decide to launch their new forum. They post about it in their Discord. They lock everything on the existing forum on the ProBoards, and Scott makes a post saying, oh, you have to come to this new website now. Obviously, when they did that, I went on, right, well, no, that's not happening. Removed Scott's post. I didn't delete their accounts. I took away their admin privileges from Scott, PFM, and 4-Star TCG. It's at this point I start getting voice calls from Scott. Scott likes to talk in voice calls because, you know, they're not written down. There's no screenshots from voice calls. You can't prove what he was trying to say. And basically he has a discussion with me about it. He comes up with some nonsense lie that he thought he owned the forum and he thought that he owned all these people's data. And it's weird. Scott has this thing where as soon as he's accidentally broken the law on something, somehow he's completely technologically inept and he doesn't know how to turn a computer on. Oh, there's no way that he would do that. How would he know that? It's all these other people that do what he tells them to do. I guess they broke the law. Anyway, basically, he tries to come to an arrangement where he says, let's let both sites coexist, and we'll both acknowledge the existence of the other. And again, in trying to keep the peace, we say, yeah, fine. And we make a post on the ProBoard saying, like, hey, this other forum exists. You can go to it if you want. This one will still be here. Obviously, the post on their website never appears. And the word ProBoards gets blacklisted in their Discord. I literally have a post that someone sent me from the time where it said, you have used a banned word in this server, and it was ProBoards. But hey, obviously he completely controlled the Discord. He set the Discord up. I had no part of that, so I couldn't control what was happening on there. But that is what happened with E4, with the forum. That is why, obviously, we tried to rebrand it, and we changed the name of it to try and keep our end going, but they were sending out these emails. They were mass emailing everyone saying, you know, come to the new forum, all your posts are waiting there. behind the scenes, we've heard from people. They were telling people, obviously, that we had forced them off that site, that we had done a hostile takeover. They were encouraging as many people as possible to delete their accounts from our forum, which meant that the forum didn't even really work as an archive, because we tried to keep it up because it had interesting information, that we didn't want traffic going to their website because they're criminal scum. But obviously, they kept getting people to delete their accounts, so posts were being lost, more and more information was being removed, which is why in the end we just archived everything. And at the time, I would have probably spoken out more about it, but people on their side, I believe it was specifically Fourth Star TCG, started putting out threats against people, threats of doxing, and it eventually got to the point where friends of mine were genuinely terrified for their lives. So they said, Dan, please don't rock the boat. Dan, please don't say anything about this. And that's why I didn't. And that's why they kind of got away with it.
Dan, are you exaggerating? I feel like you're exaggerating right now when you say that friends of yours were like genuinely scared for their lives.
No, I'm not exaggerating. I I obviously don't know. I can't be inside my friends' heads to say how they feel, but from talking to them, everything felt genuine. I went along with what they asked me to. They said, please, I'm genuinely very, very worried of these nutters that do follow them turning up.
And I'm being facetious, Dan. What I want you guys that are watching to know is this is one of the many reasons that Dan has not kind of allowed me to kind of get him into this mode, and where he's talked about it for years now because of the threats that his friends sustained. Yeah. So this is not a joke. This is real. These are real physical kind of stuff that, if in the beginning, it's just, you have to honor people. Okay. You have to honor people no matter whether or not you like what they do or not in the way that they act. So when Dan told me about this the very first time, I said, let's go get these guys. And he said, David, we just can't do it. I'm not comfortable doing it. Now, so it's a litigious thing, right? It's a taking them head on. It's money, it's expense, it's time. He said, I don't want to deal with it. That's exactly how I am, just so you guys know. My sister sues anyone and everyone. She's spent her entire life suing every single entity and person she's come across. She's suing me right now because I had to rescue my mom when my dad was dying last December. So she's suing me because my mom said, get out of my, this, get out of the will, get out of this. You didn't come to your dad's funeral, get the hell out of my life. And so she decided to say, I did things now in the financial area. And my company's like, here comes whack job. Here we go. Okay. So that's fine. Anybody can do that. I don't sue anyone for anything because I don't care. But you have to understand and respect whatever people want to do. It's how it is. So Dan didn't want to deal with it, address it. I got it and left him alone. I'm glad that this has been a chance for him to at least rekindle a lot of this, get it out there in public, because Scott Pratt, SM Pratt, is maybe the most non-visible, non-knowable celebrity, non-celebrity narcissist that I've ever known. And everything is going to be tuned to his narrative. Everything is about power and money. We said it last week. And I'm glad that Dan, who is, like I said last time, I'll say it till I go to my grave, which, as you guys know, probably sooner than I want. Sorry, Mom, I said it again. Dan, this is some serious stuff. Let me add some levity. So my mom calls me. I called my mom this morning. One of us called each other. And I said, Mom, she said, David, I just got your dad's headstone. I got to put some words on there. And it's going to take another 8 months for them to make it and put it on the grave. And I said, well, Mom, my mom's 87 and I'm teasing her about being old. Okay. I have a sense of humor. It's what I do. Don't get through life without some sense of humor. How Dan tolerates mine, I don't know. So I said, Mom, do you really want to make sure we just put words on there? Because in your life, as you go to visit him, your vision is likely to wane. So why don't we put both words and Braille? And she didn't like that, because that meant that she was too close to dying. And she went on a diatribe about her eyesight. She had some wonderful operation a few years ago that's like experimental, and she can outsee anybody in the world, even at 87, which, by the way, 100% true. I can't see jack nothing because of looking at these little cards with these little numbers on the bottom. And now I use 16 pair of glasses. And I tell Dan I can't see anything. I call him up. So when Dan is doing this stuff and he's calling out folks and all the people I've known in my life, the most straight shooter, the most honest guy I've ever known in the entirety of my life, folks, is Dan Norton. So you can take that for what you want. If you think Uncle Dave has an impeccable reputation, his is 100 times mine. This is real stuff, and I'm glad he's got it out there. And I'm glad that you guys got to hear about it, so at least you'll know. And it's going to lead to my final two questions, which are perfect as well.
I still have more to say before we get to your final two questions.
I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm not saying you're done, Dan. I want you to keep going. It's a perfect tie-in because hopefully people will hang on for a few more minutes so I can ask you two important questions. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to add that the way that Scott has had this power over a lot of people is, as we saw with our friend Matty just last week, as soon as anyone says anything negative about him, he threatens a libel suit. He says, this is libelous. That's not true. Telling the truth about someone is not libelous. Libelous has to be a lie. So he threatened Matty when Matty said that Scott stole the forum. As I've just explained in full detail, they did. They stole data. They stole... It can't be a libelous statement because it's true. It's just what they did. So if you are talking about this, he can't sue you for libel because it's a true statement. But it does lead me to a story I want to tell. It kind of, I think, is another good way of just showing how his mind works. So there's a guy called Pichu Fan. I'm sure a lot of people know him. Pichu Fan has been very publicly against E4 for a few years now. So what happened with Pichu Fan happened while I was still an admin. Basically, Pichu Fan had a thread in which he had created some sort of tool that, tracked eBay sold listings, stuff like that. He'd post about it on the forum, but Scott had said, no, you can't make this an actual thing because we're not having it as part of the forum. We're not making it as like an extension or whatever. And then at some point, Pichu Fan said in his thread, like, oh, at some point I might start a Patreon to try and fund this, whatever. At this point, Scott then deletes his entire thread and says, oh, you can't talk about Patreon, whatever. Scott then gets one of his web developer guys to steal Pichu Fan's code, use his code 100%, and create the same extension with an E4 branding on it. Pichu Fan then comes out and says, hey, you stole my code. I can prove this. This is data theft. In the end, the developer agrees to put in a coded by Pichu Fan disclaimer, whatever, which is where you have to legally get around it. But the important part of this is in the admin chat, we're talking to Scott, and one of the other admins is saying to Scott, he could sue you for this. You have stolen his code. This is against the law. He could sue you. And Pratt says, no, he doesn't have the money. It wouldn't be worth it for him to sue me. So that's Scott. That is Scott Pratt all over. That is how he thinks. If he has more money than someone, it gives him the right to do whatever he wants. He doesn't believe that the law applies to him if he has more money to sue you when you call him out for it. That's just how he exists as a person. Genuinely, I feel a lot more comfortable talking about this, even though I know I'm 100% in the right and I'm 100% legally fine. I am more okay talking about this because I have David on my side. Because Scott Pratt, yeah, he has money. He could throw a load of completely BS lawsuits at people. They would fall apart, but a lot of people don't have the money to defend it. But I know that David has my back, if I ever have to. I know that David is a lawyer, and I know David has a lot of lawyers. And I know that I am 100% in the right on this one.
I'll give you one more on that, Dan. I've got people behind me. I've got people who I referred to in the last podcast that were trying to get stuff done in the environment of E4 / Discord / whatever that Pratt sabotaged. Basically went in, stripped away stuff, went underneath those people and did the deals for himself. So those people also have lots and lots of attorneys, and it's been talked about multiple times. So all of you watching that are Mr. Pratt's friends, even if it's Mr. Pratt as Barney's buys or whoever else that was, just understand, sue at your leisure. That's a UK term for leisure, because you're going to have the whole world standing in your backyard, making you account for the whole thing. and all the damages that will be assessed because of it as well. So no one's afraid of Mr. Pratt. Mr. Pratt is a very insecure person. I talked about it last podcast. When I got hired at Merrill Lynch as a financial advisor prior to moving to RBC 6 years ago, I was very nervous. How am I going to get clients? What am I going to do? And then we would have meetings and all the advisors would sit in the room and the bosses would talk about how you go about getting new clients. And I was nervous. What do you do? And I was so scared of all of those other advisors sitting next to me because they were going to steal the best idea and the best thing, and I wasn't going to be able to be successful. And my boss took me aside and he said, David, there's plenty of business to go around. Just go find it. Just do your thing. You don't need to be worried about nothing. You're great at what you do. You're great at doing this. You're going to have great success. So Mr. Pratt didn't have to go steal and webscape or web scrape or web sedate a whole platform. He could have just gone about his business and done it the right way, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's what he did. Now,
I mean, the thing is, he was making money off that forum. He likes to tell people that forum cost him a ton of money. But I will admit, he was making some payments for that forum. At the first point where the forum ran out of storage space, he purchased the upgrade for more storage space. That was $6 a month. And as far as I know, that was the only ongoing financial output for that forum was $6 a month. Obviously, he made that back tenfold, 100-fold, just in the people he was charging to use the forum. Maybe, I believe he made some one-off payments for inputs, things you can use on the forum. $5, $10 time things. When Scott says he lost money in that forum, it is because of how much he thinks his time is valued at. I've heard him say before that he lost $1 million on that forum because he believes that the amount of time he spent on that forum, he should have been paid $100,000 a year for 10 years. So if you hear him say he lost $1 million, that's what he means, is he thinks someone should have been paying him $100,000 a year for his time because his time is worth money and the rest of ours are worthless. And on the subject of getting involved in deals, you briefly mentioned that, David. Obviously, the big reason they jumped to their own forum was so Pratt could have more control and they could monetize it in much bigger ways. But here's another little secret that they don't want you to know about that forum that hugely differs it from when it was on Pro Boards. Obviously, when it was on Pro Boards, I was the head admin of the forum. Pratt and some others were admins, some other people were moderators. But the forum and everything like that was still owned by Pro Boards, so Pro Boards still had some control over it on the back end. And that included that Pro Boards control all private messaging. Private messaging, when you member to member, do a private message, you don't post it on the forum, Pro Boards could still monitor that because they had to check for illegal activity or whatever. But even as the head admin, I had no access to that. I was completely unable to go in and read any private messages that people want to send. But hey, you know what happens when you put a completely new forum on your own server? Oh, you have access to everything. That means if you use the new E4 website, if you send a private message to someone, Pratt can read it, PFM can read it, Full Star TCG can read it. There is no real privacy from them on that forum. And since I mentioned those three people, I'm going to just say now, obviously, I know from my involvement, those three people, Pratt, PFM, Full Star TCG, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the laws that they were breaking. They knew everything that was going down. Other admins and moderators who are on that site now, I will say I don't know how much they knew about it. I will say I know it was Pierce and Millhouse were moderators on the Pro Boards forum. I believe they're still moderators on the new forum. I don't know how in-depth they knew about what they were doing. I don't know if they knew about the law breaking. There were some other mods added later. Obviously, Pratt's not going to have told them what happened. I will call out, though, and say Gem Mint Pokemon, someone else who I used to consider a friend, I talked to him at London Worlds before he became a mod for E4. We had a long discussion about what happened with E4. I told him about the breakdown. I told him about how it was an illegally cloned website, about all the data theft. I told him about the doxing threats. So I will say Gem Mint Pokemon 100% knew everything that had gone on with that website before he became a mod. And that's why I no longer have any interest in dealing with him, the same way I no longer have any interest in dealing with Pratt, PFM, or 4th Star TCG.
So I have a couple things to say. Number one is, when you talk about the naming and the E4 and like we got it renamed, so now it's mine, I'm going to call every large company in the country starting next week. I want to put together a list, and I'm going to ask them if I rename their companies for more successful marketing purposes, can I take over the company as sole owner or new CEO? So I'm going to try that one just in case, Dan. It's worth it. If it doesn't work for the big companies, maybe the smaller ones. And then, Dan, it's interesting. When you were talking, I don't know why my mind goes to different places. I don't get into politics, folks. I don't want to talk about any of that stuff. I just want to say there's been some situations in the world that are going on right now where the news lately has been about certain people saying, I do not agree with what's going on in the administration. I do not agree with this, etc. So I'm looking at tendering my resignation and getting out of this now. So, where does it become the case where people actually will stand up for what's right, admittedly, potentially even at their own expense? Now, who knows behind the scenes with all the things that Pratt did, how much more money these folks are making now, these other people that kind of took the site over and stuff. But it's just interesting from a moral and ethical standpoint, at what point you've seen and heard enough and understand it that you say, I don't want to be part of it anymore, especially when you know of these other things and other moderators. You look at CBD saying, I don't have an interest to be a part of it anymore. CBD 1, 2, 3, 5 collection. So I can't make that decision for people. A lot of people have more standard, fundamental beliefs than others and just won't associate with folks like that. And then there's people that come around, we all know somebody politically who's been known to be narcissistic, and a lot of folks went one way for a while, have changed. So it's just, it's really a private choice, but it's disappointing to folks like Dan and I to see that people that they know the story. Hopefully Dan has enlightened many of you to what went on. It certainly has to me. But those other folks know what's gone on and have chosen to just ride along for the ride. And I've talked to them as well. And some of them say something like this. Well, I don't have anything to do with that. I'm just a moderator. I don't have anything to do with what's really going on. So that's always the excuse, is sort of bury your head and act like none of it happened, and none of it's happening even today. So disappointing, but it kind of is what it is. So.
Yeah, I will say a thing. There's a lot of people one of the things I've heard as to why a lot of people stay in there is they say, oh, I don't want to get involved in the drama. I've called this out in videos and stuff before. Yes, there is just sometimes a lot of drama in the Pokemon world. Sometimes it's just unnecessary nonsense that people are bringing up just to spark views, just to make a conversation, just to make themselves heard, and it is just pointless drama. I think when you're talking about an actual crime, when you're talking about this huge screwing over of other collectors, other people who used to be friends, when you're talking about threats of doxing, I don't think we're just talking about drama anymore. I don't think that what's happening here is something you can just say, this is drama, I'm going to ignore it. I think we're well past that. And I think, honestly, anyone who just tries to dismiss this as, oh, I don't want to get involved in the drama, maybe I think you need to have a bit more of a look at it and see what's actually happening. I will say to people, obviously when all the change happened, I just resigned myself to be like, okay, well, I guess I'm never going to be involved in that forum or in the Discord or anything again. How much am I really going to lose out on? Am I just going to be missing out on deals? Am I not going to be able to buy cards? Am I not going to be able to talk to people? And honestly, I've lost nothing. There has been no time where I've wanted to buy some cards where I can't because I'm not part of that forum. There's been no times where I've tried to talk to people or have a fun event where I can't because I'm not part of that forum. Obviously, they have their own meetups at Worlds, or they do whatever they do. They do E4 stuff at Worlds. I don't really care anymore. But I still get on with people. There's still really great people out there. Even if there are people who still use the forum, they're probably going to talk to you either way. But there are other great communities for Pokemon. You know, their Instagram is actually a really great place to meet people who are other collectors. I talk to a lot of people on there. I meet a lot of different people in smaller circles. You know, there are other Discords. There are a lot of other creators who aren't criminal scum who have their own Discords. And they have great communities and stuff on there. That's just the way it is. So honestly, if you're sticking with that forum because you're worried that that's where you need to be, you're worried that that's kind of some inner circle that you have to be in to have access to anything special, you don't. You're not going to lose out on anything by leaving that forum and leaving that Discord if you want, and just never interacting with those moderated people again. Just laying it out there to people. There are great people out there.
I think that's really good, Dan. I mean, it's so nice to hear you say all that stuff that really you don't have to associate it with it. There's lots of other opportunities and stuff. I will say, I don't care what you want to call the word crime or whatever, but to me, it's a crime if you're paying SM Pratt to listen to his Patreon, because there's nothing that's being put out there that's not absolutely designed just to get you to give him his money. There's no real advice or anything, or no objective, unbiased advice. By the way, just to do with Discords and things like that, I used to have a Discord. I'm just not, I'm too old to maintain anything. I'm glad to go on and talk a lot, but as far as maintaining and stuff, I couldn't really handle it. If there's someone out there that's listening to this going, oh my goodness, like I'm a tech wizard, I'm 26 years old and got nothing to do but, play video games and watch football and collect Pokemon and develop websites. If you want to put something together, I don't expect any of you to want to do this, but if there's some crazy person out there, guy or gal, that says, hey, I'm going to put together a Koffee Talks Discord because let's try to change the whole tenor of this thing and put together something that's legitimately positive and people can talk about all the things we're talking about, I'd love to see it and love to be a part of it. So Dan, not so much. He's busy and he's got things going on. The dog's got to get fed. He's got another, judge trip with Laura somewhere, pick up some new cards somewhere. They're going somewhere in January. I'm not going to get my Worlds cards till like maybe mid-next. You know when I'm going to get my Worlds cards for this year? At Worlds next year. By the way, I'm not sure Pratt goes to Worlds anymore. But if he does, it's going to be fun to see him in Hawaii. Anyways, let's see. Do I have anything else I have on here? No, I said all that stuff. Dan, you got more? Because you could go on all night. It's such a relief for you, but we got to close down here pretty quick.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think that's it. I think that's closed up. Hopefully it's answered any of the other questions people had about what went on with E4 and stuff. It's nice to finally actually get it all out in the open.
I call it memorializing it for historical purposes forever. It's critically important. I'm glad you got to do it. I think the response is going to be absolutely positive because everybody knows you don't have it any other way. So here are my two questions for you guys before Dan closes out. Number one, we had so much interest. I had so many comments on when I put that purple post out there about them banning. We kind of glossed over that. They banned Dan and David, our names, the podcast, whatever. Yeah. Despite people talking about how it was, positive that the Raichus were graded even on the forums. So is that okay? Is it all right for them to ban it? And, the first thing I don't do politics, don't do any of the rest of it, but should people really understand that's what's going on? Do people on E4 know that's going on? When you think about X, formerly Twitter, I don't think Musk, bans stuff that's against him, even if he doesn't like it. I think it becomes almost too crazy to do that and still give credibility to the forum. He may ban some stuff, but not the generic stuff like people complaining about Scott Pratt. But so first one is, should freedom of speech trump this whole notion of them being able to just ban everything when all we're doing is making commentary? Or because it's against their founder and head authoritarian person out there, it's not okay. So I want comments on that. Give me a comment. We don't have to, David. We're too busy to take a minute or two. We spent all this time watching your podcast. It's ridiculous. What do we have, all the time in the world to do nothing? No, we love you guys. Just help out a little bit. Give us some ideas. And number two question is, this is important. I've had some very good friends of mine say the following to me since the last podcast. David, you're burying all the good stuff down inside the video. The Rattle stuff you put in last time came in 1 hour and 45 minutes. No one's going to know it's there. The Pratt stuff you put in this time came at an hour into the video. No one's going to watch it that long. And if they do, they're going to be the only ones that know. The rest of the world's going to not know. You need to take the videos and segment them smaller so they're out specifically on these topics that are of importance and interest and we think the hobby should know. What do you guys think? Does that make sense? Should we segment? Will it be okay if we do segment? It's on Dan's channel. Does Dan have enough followers on his channel? Should it go to mine? Should it go to both? Dan's almost got as many followers as I do, so I'm like saying anything there. But I'm just telling you, I need your feedback. I need to know what you guys think because you're younger than me. You're better looking than me. You eat healthier than me. You're smarter than me. Your futures are brighter than mine. And your Pokemon card collections are better than, okay, no, not that one. I'm going to hold mine for that one just in case. Okay. But they're as good as mine. They're as good as mine. I tease. Okay. I got nothing on you guys. All right. Dan, that's my 2 questions. Hopefully they'll comment. If you don't comment, this is what we're going to do. And I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm not going to screw around. You don't comment. 1, you will be banned from Koffee Talks podcast watching in the future. 2, your address will be published. I will come and find you. 3, I will deliver something unhealthy food on your porch. And 4, you will be forced to eat it on a subsequent video that you will be banned from on our channel, but I'll be able to watch on yours. Okay, Dan, what do you got?
I don't know. Yeah. I guess answer those questions. I'll maybe do some segments and clips. We'll see what's happening in the future. Hopefully, this is now the end of it. We've both got some stuff off our chest over the last couple of weeks, and we'll be back to just talking a lot more about nice, cool Pokemon card content over coming episodes. I know I have a lot here that I want to talk about from recent times, but that it's been cathartic. I will admit it has been good to finally talk about it. And hopefully we'll have some more guests and stuff soon. Let us know what guests you would like to see us talk to, and then especially go and let those guests know that you want to see them on the podcast, because if we just go to them and say, hey, will you come on our podcast, they'll say, who are you? And that's very fair.
Absolutely. And if we invite you on the podcast and you do not come, we will tell all of your secrets. You will get a video specifically about yourself. I'm kidding. Don't you guys know when you guys start watching the real podcast, go back a few, go to 19. It was fun. Go up a few. And then we're going to get back to doing the fun stuff we have and talking about, look at my post tomorrow. I'm going to give you some $2 cards that I'm going to put in my Instagram post. It's not going to be tomorrow. He's got to edit the video. What am I talking about? It's forget everything I just said. There's no post tomorrow. It's going to happen down the road. Just watch, have fun, have a great time, love your collections, support each other. And we're going positive from here on out now that we've let the cobwebs come out of the cellars. We have to let the hobby know the historical, because historical perspective is important. We look at a pre-release Raichus and all the rest of it, right? You're looking at Disco. This is all from 1999, 2000 time frame. So we can't just let history just abolish itself, just disappear. God, you know what? Come on. You want to go in the ring with me? Let's do this, Dan. You want to do this? No, that's for the other guys. Okay, the bad guys. All right, I'm good. I'm done. I'm done.
Right.
I have nothing left. I got to eat. My dinner's warm and cold now.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was Koffee Talks. Thanks to everyone who did make it this far. Be sure to check us out on socials, whatever. Just keep watching. Come back next week. Watch the old episodes. Thanks to More Than Never for our music that they let us use for free. Their links are in the description too. I should shout them out. Go check them out. They have a new single that came out just this week, I think, maybe last week. Go check their channel out. Listen to that. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to have a